I think I can put that. So if we've got a mover and seconder, I'll put that on the voices. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I declare that carried. Thank you. We move on to the next item, which is 8.2, the annual plan and the mayoral proposal. Just remind the purpose is to set out the Mayor's recommendations for the annual plan 2026-27 for consideration and decision making by the Budget and Performance Committee ahead of their recommendations to the governing body. This item is to consider the Mayor's proposal for the annual budget for recommendation to the governing body for adoption. What we have before us is the proposal that we have consulted on with the public and asked local boards also for their feedback. Before we begin, a few things on process. This is an important decision-making item, so I would appreciate your cooperation in helping to run the meeting smoothly as possibly we can. Please be very clear on questions versus comments. For questions, we have both the Chief of Staff to answer any questions on the mayoral proposal itself, and we have the finance team present to answer any questions on the staff advice. They're all sitting at the front table now. Now, to date, I've received we have received one amendment, which has been circulated to everybody. I haven't received any others. Any amendments should have been run by the finance team, which I understand that the amendment has for his advice, to ensure that the budget is balanced. We will take adjournments if necessary to assess any impacts on the balancing of the budget. We do not want to be making changes to amendments wording in the middle of the debate. So ideally, we can get the amendments tight, and I think there's been some work done on the amendment that's been proposed to make sure it is tight. So ideally, we don't have to make changes during the debate. All right. So I'll have this moved. The mover will obviously be the Mayor because it's his proposal. I just wanted to offer the opportunity to the Deputy Mayor if she wanted to second it. Yeah, okay. Moved by the Mayor, moved by the Mayor, seconded by a Deputy. Thank you for that. I'll now hand over to the Mayor to make some comments before we move to the Chief of Staff from the Mayor's office. So over to you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Opening up, I'll acknowledge that some Aucklanders are doing it tough, and it's a tough time at the moment. And nobody particularly likes to see a 7.9 race increase. But this is the year the City Rail Link bill lands, and essentially it's a year that global events, including the conflict of Iran and resulting fuel prices, which have been said to be in the order of 25 to 50 million, but given events in the last few days, it'll be nearer 50. We could be facing up to 15% rate rises because of those costs. Essentially what we're offering here is a zero rate rise plus a train. The easier response would be to pass the cost straight on to ratepayers. I'm not going to do that. 7.9 is a very risky package as it stands, but it's what we had consulted on and all voted on for the long-term plan last year after months of consultation. The long-term plan had 5.9%, was the lowest in New Zealand last year, followed by 7.9 this year in order to cover the cost of the rail link, City Rail Link, and 3.5 into the future, which is good. To get to 7.5, we have to find savings of 106 million, which we've yet to all find, plus the diesel increase of 20 to 50 million. These are huge sums of money. It'll all set out in the staff advice, and I hope you've all read it. That figure is equivalent, the savings this year are more than the total turnover of 54 councils. This proposal keeps faith with what was agreed in the long-term plan, consulted with Auckland and approved by Council. I like to do what we said we would do. It's not going to be easy to do it, but I'd like to thank everyone who's worked on the proposal. One of my biggest worries is that if we do things like pushing off depreciation or cutting dumb stuff, our credit rating, which is already on negative watch, will drop, and any change in the interest bill will wipe out any 2% savings, just like that. So this is a day to be very sensible. With that, I'll hand it back to Greg and the staff, but thank you for letting me introduce it and move it.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Team, just as we move through today, people will have differing opinions. The day may be long, people might get tired. Can I just make one? Wayne, could you just turn your mic off there? I just want to make kind of one plea, I guess. If you want to talk to your colleagues beside you or near you, can you please do that in a respectful way that isn't so loud that distracts other members? Okay. And Wayne. So if you can listen to what I'm saying here, because it tends to come from that corner sometimes. But just all I'm saying is that if you want to discuss things with your colleagues, please try to do it in a way that you're not so loud that you're distracting other people's trains of thoughts, and particularly when they're speaking. And I don't want people calling out across the room either. Let's just try and follow this as per the standing orders. That's my only plea for today, to be respectful to each other and handle this professionally. On that note, Tamsin, I hand it over to you as Chief of Staff.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors and Haukura members. So the process for the annual plan for the 2026-2027 cycle began last year. Decisions were taken in December to agree to the items that you would consult with Aucklanders on. That proposal that you took out to consultation was in line with what you approved for Year 3 in the current LTP. Consultation lasted a month in February, and you have since been presented with the feedback from both the public and local boards. As noted previously in the previous item, we have incorporated feedback from local boards on the issue of funding, and have noted a lot of the feedback provided that fits within the LTP. We are currently working with staff to ensure that this is adequately captured and included as part of direction setting for that process. After consultation, you also received updated financial information, including the impact of the fuel crisis to Council's operations and the financial risk that we carry into FY27 if we remain with the proposed financial settings. Today is one of the final steps in this statutory process, which will enable you to set rates as you are legally required to do before the end of the financial year. I will briefly speak to the Mayor's final proposal, which was discussed with you at a workshop last week, where you had the opportunity to ask questions of both the Mayor and of staff. Since then, we have made a few very minor amendments to the proposal. We have added an advocacy to central government on the issue of a rates assistance scheme and further levers we could provide to support those ratepayers who are in financial hardship. These schemes, not dissimilar to rates postponement, are one of the best mechanisms we have to provide financial assistance to those in need. The proposal includes detail on the other financial settings required to balance any budget. These are $3.6 billion of capital investment in transport, water and community assets, 213% debt to revenue ratio, $106 million of operating savings and $67 million of asset sales. Cost pressures exist across the group. There is a high degree of risk associated with fuel and inflation increasing or staying persistently high throughout the year. This must be mitigated within existing envelopes, which will require significant effort from staff and potentially further decisions from this committee on service levels if it becomes necessary. This is on top of a savings target of $106 million, and so far staff have only identified less than half of that amount. This isn't an easy budget, but it is balanced and it sticks to what we have consulted on. Similar to last year, funding for major events remains challenging, and while we have taken a short-term approach to close the gap where possible, longer-term sustainability will be a focus for long-term plan discussions. The Major Events Fund supports the delivery of events like ASB Tennis Classic, Pacifica, Polyfest, Diwali, Lantern Festival, the Auckland Marathon, the Writers' Festival, State of Origin, and other supporting fixtures into 2027. In the Mayor's proposal, he also includes direction on other items for his proposal. We are seeing progress with the application of better value projects across the group. This must continue, and the expectation set through this proposal is that these rules are incorporated into the development of all future budgets. Future advice should include a review of design standards across all activities, an increased focus on benefit realisation and reporting, improved supplier management practices, and a strengthened approach to performance benchmarking. The proposal confirms a short-term approach to centrally managing cost pressures for some local boards, estimated to be around $6 million. This is not a long-term solution and is contingent on the rates increase as outlined by the Mayor. Options on changes to fairer funding to address the longer-term issues that some local boards have raised will flow through the LTP, and that work is well underway. The first phase of CCO reform has been and gone. The next phase must produce real benefits to Aucklanders, and the proposal clearly states an expectation that in-house functions must now deliver on the intent of reform. Further direction is provided to the Auckland Urban Development Office and our property and economic development functions to provide greater clarity around expectations for the next year and in anticipation of the LTP and the advice that they must produce for you. The proposal also includes interim steps for transport reform for the next 6 months. These include a council-led review of all major projects over $20 million, convening a temporary traffic management advisory group to reduce cost and associated disruption from that activity, a review of Auckland Transport's traffic light technology, a program of minor fixes to the arterial roading network, a better approach to our enforcement policy, and a review of design standards. Further and more specific direction is provided on arts and culture sector reform and the city centre, which further elaborates on direction provided through December's mayoral proposal. Finally, the proposal establishes 5 priority areas for the Mayor to be addressed through this next long-term plan. Importantly, it highlights the current LTP as the starting point for the next and the opportunity to completely embed better, cheaper, faster across everything that we do. The staff alongside me here are happy to respond to questions that you might have, as am I. Thank you, and over to the Chair.
All right, thank you for that. So now we'll move into questions. Again, we'll go through resolve, ideally. So at the moment, I've got Member Henry, followed by Councillor Gillan, followed by Councillor Fuller. Tau.
Kia ora. Given that on a number of occasions through the document, it says it should have been 15. How come it's not 15%?
So the document states, staff advice, is that the combined pressures would have meant a rates increase of 15%. However, the direction we took was that the Mayor was keen to stick with the LTP proposal of 7.9%, and mitigations are proposed, a combination of direct mitigations and risk that would allow you to get back to that 7.9%. And so that's what was prepared in the staff advice and then through the mayoral proposal.
So if at the next round in 12 months' time, or whenever it is, we find ourselves, do we find ourselves 7% or 8% shy of starting again? You know what I mean?
So the mitigations that we've proposed, or that staff have advised on, are permanent mitigations and not temporary, and staff have been clear to advise that those sort of temporary mitigations are not what we would support. that savings, for example, or reductions in cost here should be permanent and be enduring, so that we can stick with the 3.5% that was in the long-term plan for the following year.
But just to add to your point, Member Hinare, there is a degree of risk that we are accepting in order to hold the rates increase at 7.9% in which we consulted on. So I think we have tried to make that clear in the mayoral proposal that we do accept a degree of risk in order to hold where we consulted on.
Would it be fair to say that by doing that, you are loading that risk exponentially next time and the next time and the next time?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. To some degree, yes, there is always, risk that we face challenges that we have not foreseen, and that kind of conversation in terms of managing that longer term risk will need to take place through the long term plan. And also part of the staff advice has been very clear that if we found ourselves in a more pessimistic outlook in terms of interest rates, inflation, and further fuel impacts from the fuel crisis, that staff will have to come back to this committee and to the governing body to look for further mitigations which could potentially impact service levels.
Maybe just to add to that, for this budget, for this financial year, there's about 85 million of risk that we're managing. Part of that is the savings target, the 106 million that was talked about earlier, we haven't fully solved yet. If we can solve that in an enduring way, that will set us up better for the future. If it's a bunch of one-off savings, then it doesn't. So that's one element. And the other key part of that 85 million is some risk around fuel prices. So if fuel prices are higher, then over the next 12 months, then as Tamsin has said, we'd have to come back and make some further adjustments to the budget. That is probably, hopefully, a shorter term thing in terms of the fuel prices. But looking ahead, the biggest risk that we have, and the thing that might put that 3.5% future rates increase at risk, is more the longer term economic outlook. What does the fuel prices mean for inflation rates and interest rates? And that is kind of the global economic situation and creates a little bit of risk for us. That's something we're keeping an eye on. But through here, we're trying as much as we can to find enduring savings and not short-term things that just adds to future problems.
Thank you. Councillor Gillan.
Oh, thank you. I've got questions about local board funding and about depreciation. So on the local boards, I'll just repeat the question I asked earlier. There's been a lot of useful feedback provided by the local boards, but apart from the funding issues which have been partially addressed, it isn't clear to me how the feedback has actually been incorporated into the draft proposal. So could you please go through that?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Gillan. As I said in my introduction, the degree to which we have incorporated feedback has largely been around the funding issues, which we believe to be the priority, and that was, I think, indicated also by members of this committee. Our read of the feedback is a large majority of that sits within the long-term plan, and it is things that we are very keen to address through that process. We are working with the appropriate staff, both in finance and in local boards, to ensure that that we have captured that and that it flows through.
Okay, thank you. My next question on local board funding is the table that you have in the staff advice on page 25. That indicates that you have managed to mitigate a lot of the cost pressures on the 7 worst affected boards. That were going to be extremely out of pocket, although I note that, is it correct that they've still had to make savings totalling 1.8 million? That's Henderson, Massey, Aotearoa, Papatoe, Rodney and Waitakere Rangers have had to make service cuts totalling 1.8 million. So that's my first question. And then even after the top-up that has come from the governing body, there's still $7.6 million of the previous top-up that local boards are having to rely on to solve cost pressures that are regionally driven and through no fault of their own. I'll use the example in my own area. Kaipatiki is still $1.5 million down from what they should be receiving under fairer funding model. Can you please comment on those?
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the question. So I guess just firstly on the 1.8 million in mitigation. So those were, local boards were invited to actually look through their full funding and the services they provide, and where possible, look to make sensible sort of, minor changes where I think there's actually better value that could be sort of found elsewhere. And so they were presented with a number of options around what they could look at, and in some cases, you'll notice some local boards actually found some savings or mitigations in order to redistribute to other services. So these are choices that local boards make, and with the, I guess, the sort of assertion that actually any sort of backstop or remaining gap that they may find they've got, the governing body would be ready and willing to step in to support that. And that comes through in that $4.1 million figure in additional GB funding. And yes, you're correct. So as part of implementing this sort of new funding policy for local boards, sort of called fairer funding, an additional $50 million per year has been provided to lift local boards to sort of an equitable level. And some of that has been needed, so 7.6 has been needed to cover some pressures. And I guess just to be clear, I think I would suggest it's not so necessarily regionally driven. These are pressures for things like utilities and gas, electricity that actually regional activities also experience. It's sort of not unique to local boards and not necessarily.
But they did used to be covered regionally, though, weren't they? And now under fairer funding, they've gone on the local boards' budgets.
Yes, that's correct. So the change in funding policy from a sort of asset-based model where the governing body would need to, historically would have had to deal with any pressures in local activities, local boards under the new model have a sort of funding envelope which they need to make choices to deliver services out of, and that also means that where there are cost increases above inflation or above expectations, that they also need to then make choices about how to deal with those.
Okay, thank you. Now, depreciation. Can you just confirm how much is currently, Auckland Council is currently collecting and setting aside for depreciation, and what percentage of our rates is going towards that? Because I understand there has been, an increase over a number of years, partly because of Council's policy to fully fund depreciation.
I'll just need to dig up those numbers, but at the moment, the proposal, as our process of moving towards fully funding, we're looking to fund 95% of depreciation in the next year, and I'll just dig up those numbers and come back.
Okay, that's fine. While you dig that up, I just want to confirm that fully funding depreciation is not actually a legal requirement, is it? It is a choice of Auckland Council, a political choice, and that I believe other councils calculate. Calculate on renewals rather than asset value through depreciation. Would that be correct?
So the council's required under legislation to operate to a balanced budget or to formally resolve as to a reason why they would not operate to a balanced budget. Our reading of that is that balanced budget should include depreciation as a cost.
So, yep, so it is to confirm, it's a legal requirement that councils have run a balanced budget, and the starting point is covering all of your expenses, including depreciation. Councils can depart from that if they consider it to be prudent. So that comes back to the financial policies in your long-term plan. Our long-term plan and our revenue and financing policy that's been consulted on, has a policy of moving to fully fund depreciation by 2028. That's been a long-standing policy. That's been a key part of our financial settings for a long period of time.
Okay, thank you. So it is a choice of Auckland Council, and this is the track we've gone down. So I'm still interested to know how much of the the rates amount is going towards fully funding depreciation due to those choices being made by the governing body in the past. And I guess how much we would also save if instead we were calculating depreciation, or calculating based on renewals, as I believe Christchurch Council and others do.
Is that something I can come back to, Michael, towards the end of this question?
Yes, sorry, no, we haven't had this in advance, so we'll need to just